She didn't hit the jackpot. No massive inheritance. No overnight success story. She grew up in a regular family, with bills that sometimes didn't get paid on time and parents who worried about money every single month. She didn't go to an Ivy League school. She didn't have a high-paying job. But by 35, she was retired, financially free, all because of real estate. No gimmicks, no gurus, no get-rich-quick schemes. Just a simple strategy, some guts, and a mindset most people never develop. And the way she did it? It flips the entire idea of wealth, success, and security on its head. This isn't some fairy tale where someone flips one house and wakes up rich the next morning. It's not one of those Instagram hustle stories where everything magically falls into place. No, this one's different. The first time she invested in real estate, she was flat out broke. No backup plan. No rich uncle to bail her out. Just a mountain of fear, a small savings account, and a whole lot of doubt. She didn't know what she was doing, and honestly, she almost backed out. But she didn't. She took the leap. And by the age of 35, she didn't just make it, she completely walked away from the 9-to-5 grind. No more alarms. No more meetings. No more answering to anyone. She bought back her time. And not because she made six figures or had a flashy tech job, but because she played the long game with real estate. She learned how to turn regular income into cash-flowing properties. How to spot deals when everyone else was scared. And how to make her money work harder than she ever could. In this video, I'm pulling back the curtain on exactly how she did it, step by step. Her first property. The exact strategy she followed. The mindset shifts that made her unstoppable. The mistakes that almost cost her everything. And the one bold, risky move that completely changed the game. If you've ever dreamed of quitting your job, traveling more, spending time with your family, or just living life on your own terms, this is the story you need to hear. Because she didn't just build wealth, she built freedom. And what she figured out? You can copy it. She grew up in a small, quiet town, the kind where everyone knew each other's business and life moved at a steady, predictable pace. No one talked about passive income or building wealth. That kind of language just didn't exist there. The path was laid out for you from the start: do well in school, go to college if you could afford it, land a steady job with benefits, and hold on to it long enough to retire with a decent pension, maybe by 65, if you were lucky. That was the blueprint. Safe. Familiar. No questions asked. But even as a kid, she felt something was off. She couldn't explain it back then, but there was this low-key tension that lived in her house. Her parents were good people, honest, hardworking, but money always seemed to be a source of stress. Every month felt like a race. Rent was always due. The car always seemed to need repairs. Groceries, gas, surprise bills, it was like life kept asking for more than they had. She remembers hearing quiet arguments late at night, the way her dad would rub his forehead when the mail came, or how her mom would joke about stretching every dollar, but you could tell it wasn't really a joke. That stuck with her. So when she turned 18, something inside her clicked. She didn't just want to survive. She didn't want to live paycheck to paycheck, constantly trading time for just enough money to get by. She wanted more, not more stuff, but more control. She made a decision right then and there: she was going to figure out how money actually worked. Not just how to earn it, but how to keep it, grow it, and eventually, make it work for her instead of the other way around. Her first job out of college was nothing special. It paid $42,000 a year, a decent starting salary, but far from life-changing. No signing bonus. No stock options. No perks or flashy job title. Just a modest paycheck that barely stretched far enough to cover her small one-bedroom apartment, student loans, groceries, and a car that was already starting to make weird noises. After bills were paid, she had a little left, maybe a couple $100 each month if she didn't splurge. For most people, that extra cash went straight to brunches, weekend trips, happy hours, or the latest tech toys. But she didn't see it that way. Instead of spending it, she started asking questions. How do people actually get rich? Not influencer rich, not lottery-winning rich, but sustainably, quietly wealthy. The kind of wealthy where you don't have to ask for time off to go on vacation. She'd scroll through social media, seeing people her age posting from tropical islands or expensive restaurants, and wondered, how are they affording this? Are they in debt? Are they making way more than me? Or is there something I'm missing? That curiosity sparked something. At first, it was just YouTube videos. She'd watch during lunch breaks or while folding laundry. Titles like, How to Retire in Your 30s, or How I Bought My First Rental Property, popped up, and she clicked out of pure curiosity. Then it turned into something deeper. She started reading books, thick ones, like Rich Dad Poor Dad, The Millionaire Real Estate Investor, Set for Life. She downloaded podcasts and binged them during her commute. She joined online forums and Facebook groups, silently absorbing everything. What she discovered changed everything. There was this simple, powerful concept: buy a house, rent it out, and have the rent pay the mortgage. Not only that, sometimes, you could even make money every month after all the bills were paid. That idea completely blew her mind. The fact that you could use someone else's rent payment to slowly build equity and, over time, own something that grew in value? It almost didn't seem real. Like some kind of cheat code no one had taught her in school. But it wasn't a scam. It wasn't magic. It was leverage. The kind of leverage that turns ordinary people into quiet millionaires. She realized that people weren't just working harder, they were working smarter. They were using money to buy income. By the time she turned 24, she had managed to save up $10,000. To most people, that wasn't exactly a fortune. In fact, in the world of real estate, it barely made a ripple. But to her, it was everything. Months of discipline, skipped dinners out, used furniture, side hustles, and saying no when it would have been easier to say yes. It wasn't easy. There were moments she wanted to give up. Friends teased her for being too frugal. Her coworkers didn't understand why she never joined them for weekend getaways or splurged on the latest phone. But she had a goal in mind, and this $10,000 was her ticket in. She found a small duplex listed on the edge of a working-class neighborhood, nothing fancy, nothing turnkey. The exterior paint was chipped. The front steps creaked. One of the units had stained carpet, an old stove, and that damp basement smell that lingered no matter how many windows you opened. But it was cheap, underpriced, even, and more importantly, the numbers made sense. If both units were rented, the income could cover the mortgage and leave a little left over each month. She brought it up to her friends and family, hoping someone would say, "Go for it." Instead, the reactions were mostly fear wrapped in good intentions. That's way too risky. What if the tenants don't pay? Are you really ready to be a landlord? What if the place needs thousands in repairs? What if the market crashes? What if you end up in debt? The doubts piled up quickly, and truthfully, she had most of those same fears herself. She wasn't some fearless investor. She was scared. This was the biggest decision of her life so far. It wasn't just about money, it was about the possibility of failure. Of proving everyone right. Of wasting years of savings on something that might blow up in her face. But instead of getting paralyzed, she went deep into research. She ran the numbers over and over, different scenarios, worst-case outcomes, emergency plans. She calculated how long she could survive with zero rent. She looked into repair costs, insurance, property taxes. She talked to a few local landlords. She read every lease clause, memorized eviction rules, watched videos on how to replace a leaky faucet. And when the numbers still worked, even after accounting for all the what-ifs, she decided to take the leap. She signed the papers. Wired the money. And just like that, she became a property owner. It didn't feel glamorous. There were no fireworks. No champagne. Just a heavy key in her hand and a quiet moment where she thought, okay, now what? She was officially in the game. That first duplex was anything but glamorous. There were no shiny countertops or stainless steel appliances. No trendy subway tiles or fresh hardwood floors. It was old, worn down, and looked like it hadn't been properly cleaned in years. The upstairs unit reeked of cigarette smoke, the kind that had soaked into the walls and lingered no matter how many windows you opened. The carpet was stained, the walls were a strange yellowish beige, and the kitchen cabinets creaked when you opened them. Downstairs wasn't much better. The faucet in the kitchen sink had a steady, annoying drip. The bathroom ceiling had water stains. Paint was peeling in corners. The place had definitely seen better days. But she didn't panic. She rolled up her sleeves, bought some supplies from the local hardware store, and got to work. She couldn't afford to hire a full renovation crew, so she YouTubed how to patch drywall, how to deep clean old carpet, how to reseal a faucet. She spent nights and weekends scrubbing, sanding, painting, fixing little things piece by piece. It wasn't HGTV worthy, but it was cleaner, brighter, and functional. She added a few small touches, fresh curtains, cheap but decent light fixtures, and a new coat of neutral paint. Nothing fancy, but enough to make it livable. Then came the moment of truth. She listed both units for rent with basic, honest photos. No filters. No exaggerated descriptions. Just clean, affordable housing in a decent neighborhood. She was nervous. What if no one called? What if she'd priced it wrong? What if she'd made a huge mistake? But within 2 weeks, both units were filled. The tenants weren't high-end professionals, they were working-class families, just like the people she grew up around. They needed a place to call home, and she had one to offer. When the rent checks came in that first month, she ran all the numbers again: mortgage, property taxes, insurance, basic repairs, and a little cushion for emergencies. After it all, she was making about $400 a month in pure profit. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't the kind of money that buys a new car or lets you fly first class. But it was steady. It was real. And more than anything, it was proof. Proof that this whole real estate thing actually worked. That regular people, people without millions, people without trust funds or fancy degrees, could use this to build something powerful. That little stream of cash, $400 a month, felt like the first drop of rain before a storm. Small, quiet, but full of possibility. Instead of throwing a party or splurging on something nice with that first bit of extra cash, she did something most people wouldn't. She reinvested every single extra dollar back into her dream. That $400 a month wasn't for vacations, new clothes, or fancy dinners, it was the fuel for her next move. She was saving, scrimping, and hustling harder than ever to stack enough money for her next property. She lived way below her means. While her friends upgraded their phones every year or switched cars like outfits, she drove the same reliable, slightly beat-up car for 8 years straight. No flashy rides, no brand new gadgets. She brewed her own coffee every morning instead of hitting the overpriced cafes. Weekends weren't about hitting the trendiest brunch spots or buying the latest tech, they were about budgeting, researching, and planning. This wasn't because she was cheap or joyless, far from it. It was because she saw the bigger picture. She knew the value of delayed gratification. Every time she said no to a night out or an impulse buy, she was one step closer to freedom. She wasn't playing the short game, chasing instant rewards or keeping up with the Joneses. She had a clear goal. She didn't want to wait until she was 65, stuck in the grind, dreaming about retirement. She wanted out much sooner, before she hit 40. So, she played the long game. Patient. Persistent. Focused on building something that would last, that would work for her even when she wasn't working. It was a slow, steady climb, but every sacrifice was an investment in her future freedom. And that mindset, choosing future freedom over present comfort, made all the difference. By the time she turned 28, she already owned 4 rental properties. Nothing flashy or showy, just solid, dependable duplexes and triplexes tucked into decent, working-class neighborhoods. These weren't luxury mansions or fancy condos downtown. They were homes where regular people lived, the kind of places she understood because they reminded her of where she grew up. But each one brought in steady cash flow every month, and that was what mattered most. By the time she hit 30, she had doubled down, now owning 10 rental properties. It wasn't luck. It was hard work, careful planning, and smart decisions. At first, she managed every single one herself. She answered late-night calls when the heater broke in January or the toilet overflowed on a Sunday afternoon. She handled tenant complaints, negotiated leases, and yes, even dealt with the stress of evictions when people just couldn't or wouldn't pay. It was exhausting. Some days, it felt like a full-time job, because it was. But that hands-on experience was invaluable. She learned what tenants wanted, what neighborhoods were up and coming, and how to spot a good deal before anyone else. She got better at fixing things herself, saving money on repairs and keeping the properties in shape. And most importantly, with each passing year, her passive income grew, month by month, property by property. As her portfolio grew, she got smarter about leveraging what she had. She refinanced some properties, pulling out equity to reinvest in more buildings. She educated herself on the ins and outs of real estate finance, diving into concepts like 1031 exchanges, which let her swap properties without paying capital gains taxes, and depreciation, which gave her significant tax advantages. These weren't just buzzwords, they were powerful tools that accelerated her wealth building. Real estate stopped being just a side hustle or a passion project. It became her full-time job, but the kind of job where she controlled the hours and the work. And more than that, it became her freedom plan. The path that would let her break free from the traditional 9 to 5 grind forever. It was slow, sometimes painful, and full of lessons. But she knew she was building something that no one could take away from her: financial independence. Just when things seemed to be heading up, when she was starting to feel like she had the whole system figured out, the market threw a curveball she never saw coming. Interest rates began to spike, making her monthly mortgage payments jump higher than she'd planned. Suddenly, the cost of holding onto her properties wasn't as manageable as before. At the same time, property values took a dive. Houses that were once appreciating steadily started losing value, and the equity she had counted on to keep growing started to shrink. If that wasn't enough, she ran into some serious tenant problems. One tenant caused thousands of dollars in damage, ripped up carpets, broken appliances, and walls that needed major repairs. It was the kind of costly nightmare every landlord dreads. Repairs drained her savings faster than she expected. And as if bad luck was piling on, another property sat completely vacant for 3 long months. No rent coming in, but the bills kept stacking up: mortgage, taxes, insurance, utilities, all needing to be paid whether someone lived there or not. Before she knew it, she was cash poor. The numbers on paper looked great. She technically owned over $1 million in real estate assets, but her actual bank account told a different story. It was nearly empty. She had stretched herself too thin, over-leveraged, and hoping things would keep going up without any major setbacks. That's when the fear kicked in. The fear that everything she'd worked so hard to build could crumble overnight. The feeling that she might lose it all, the properties, the dream, the future she'd promised herself. It was a gut punch, a wake-up call, and a harsh reality check all rolled into one. But it also forced her to get serious, get smart, and figure out how to survive the storm without losing everything. This was the moment where most people throw in the towel. When the pressure mounts, the cash flow dries up, and the stress becomes unbearable, it's tempting to just cut your losses. Sell a few properties, cash out whatever you can, and go back to the security of a regular paycheck. Play it safe. Avoid any more risk. It's the easy path, the comfortable path, the path most people choose when things get tough. She thought about it too. The idea of quitting crossed her mind more than once. The stress was crushing. Late nights spent worrying about how she'd cover the next mortgage payment. Phone calls from contractors with more bad news. The constant juggling act between tenants, repairs, and bills felt like it was slowly swallowing her whole. There were moments she wanted to just give up and find a normal job again, something predictable, with a steady income and fewer surprises. But instead of running, she did something different. She paused. She stepped back from the chaos, took a deep breath, and looked at the big picture. She reviewed every property, every number, every lease, and every risk. She didn't sugarcoat anything or pretend things were fine. She faced the mess head-on. She crunched the numbers and mapped out every possible outcome. Then she made one bold, risky move, the kind of move that either makes or breaks a real estate empire. It wasn't safe. It wasn't guaranteed. But it was smart, calculated, and rooted in everything she'd learned so far. This move wasn't just about surviving the downturn, it was about setting herself up to come out stronger on the other side. It was a turning point, the moment where she stopped being a cautious beginner and started thinking like a true investor, one willing to take risks, adapt, and fight for the future she wanted. She decided to cut her losses and sell 2 properties that just weren't pulling their weight. These weren't the glamorous ones or the ones she was emotionally attached to, they were the underperformers, the ones draining her energy and cash flow month after month. The rents were low, the vacancies high, and the maintenance costs kept piling up. It was tough to admit, but she knew holding onto them would only slow her down. So, she put them on the market, and after some nerve-wracking negotiations, sold them for a decent price. With that cash in hand, she made a bold move. She zeroed in on a 4-unit building in a suburb just outside the city, a place most investors hadn't noticed yet. It wasn't trendy or flashy. In fact, some people called it a risk because it was still up and coming. But she'd done her homework thoroughly. She studied the neighborhood trends, talked to locals, and followed every bit of news about new businesses moving in. Small coffee shops were opening, a few tech startups were setting up offices nearby, and a community center was getting a facelift. Even the local schools were on the rise, with new programs and improved ratings. The best part? The numbers lined up perfectly. The purchase price was reasonable, rents were projected to rise, and the cash flow after expenses was solid. This wasn't a gamble, it was a calculated bet on growth. She saw potential where others saw uncertainty, and she was ready to take the plunge. Investing in that 4-unit building wasn't just about adding another property to her portfolio. It was about stepping into the next phase of her strategy, buying smart, buying for the future, and turning challenges into opportunities. She realized she couldn't keep doing everything herself, answering tenant calls at midnight, chasing down repairs, handling endless paperwork. So, she made a smart decision and hired a property manager. Sure, it cut into her profits a bit, property management fees aren't cheap, but the trade-off was worth it. What she gained was priceless, her time and her sanity. No more sleepless nights worrying about a leaking pipe or a tenant who vanished without paying rent. With that burden lifted, she finally had the mental space to focus on bigger picture stuff, real strategy instead of just day-to-day firefighting. She started reaching out to other investors, attending meetups and online groups where people shared tips, tricks, and insider knowledge. She soaked it all in, eager to expand her understanding of real estate beyond just traditional rentals. That's when she stumbled onto short-term rentals and Airbnb. It was a whole new ballgame, more hands-on, sure, but with the potential for way higher returns. She decided to diversify and dipped her toes into the Airbnb world by converting a few units to short-term rentals. It was a risk. Managing guests, cleaning schedules, and constant bookings was a lot more work than regular tenants. But the payoff was huge. Within weeks, the new 4-unit property was fully rented out to long-term tenants, and the Airbnb unit started pulling in almost double the income she made with regular rent. Suddenly, her cash flow was skyrocketing. That extra income gave her more breathing room and more confidence. It was proof that branching out and trying new approaches could really pay off, and that managing risk didn't always mean playing it safe. This shift wasn't just about making more money, it was about creating options. More income streams meant more security, and more security meant she was one step closer to the freedom she'd been chasing all along. Year after year, her portfolio didn't just get bigger, it got smarter. She wasn't just buying properties to check a box or chase a number. She became laser-focused on quality deals, the kind that made sense financially and fit her long-term goals. She looked for properties in neighborhoods with steady growth, tenants who paid on time and took care of their homes, and buildings that required manageable upkeep instead of constant headaches. She learned the importance of building systems, ways to keep things running smoothly without having to micromanage every detail herself. She set up reliable property managers, established maintenance schedules, and created clear communication channels with tenants. This let her step back from the daily grind and concentrate on growing her business, not just maintaining it. By the time she hit 35, her real estate income was bringing in more than $15,000 every month, and that was net, after all expenses. That wasn't just pocket change. It was enough to cover her entire lifestyle comfortably, from everyday expenses to the unexpected surprises life throws at you. Travel? Covered. Healthcare? Covered. Emergencies? Covered, no sweat. She had built a financial safety net that gave her real freedom, the kind where money wasn't a constant worry, where she could make choices based on what she wanted, not what she needed to survive. That steady, growing income meant she no longer had to clock in or punch a time card. She could finally say she was done with the 9-to-5 grind, all thanks to the smart, steady, and patient way she built her real estate empire. When the day finally came for her to retire, it wasn't what anyone expected. There was no big party, no dramatic announcement, no fireworks or champagne popping. She didn't send a grand resignation email that would shake the office or make headlines. Instead, it was just a quiet, ordinary morning, the kind of morning most people don't even notice. She woke up like any other day, stretched, and made herself a cup of coffee. But this time, something felt different. There was no rush to get dressed, no pressure to be anywhere by a certain time. No emails demanding her attention, no meetings to prepare for. She realized, with this calm clarity, that she didn't have to go to work ever again. That simple realization hit her like a wave, that was it. Freedom. Pure, unfiltered freedom. She could spend her days however she wanted. If she felt like packing a suitcase and traveling the world, she could do it without asking for time off. If she wanted to sleep in for days, or start a side hustle, or finally volunteer for a cause close to her heart, there was nothing holding her back. Heck, she could even binge-watch Netflix for a whole week without an ounce of guilt because her money wasn't tied to a paycheck anymore, it was working for her. No alarms. No deadlines. No stress. Just the quiet joy of knowing she'd built something real, something that gave her options, peace of mind, and the freedom to live life on her own terms. That's what true retirement looked like for her. Not flashy or loud, but deeply satisfying. That moment, sitting quietly on her porch, the world moving around her but for once she wasn't rushing to keep up, was worth every single sacrifice she'd made. Every sleepless night wrestling with doubt. Every scary decision that felt like jumping off a cliff without a parachute. Every no she'd uttered to nights out with friends, fancy dinners, or impulse buys that others enjoyed without a second thought. It wasn't easy. There were times when she questioned if it was all worth it. When she wondered if she'd made the right choices or if she'd just been stubborn chasing a dream. But now, in the calm of that porch, watching the sun set with nothing urgent to do, she knew it had been worth it. She wasn't rich in the sense of billion-dollar mansions or private jets. She didn't have a flashy lifestyle or designer everything. But she was rich in the way that truly counts. She was rich in freedom, the priceless kind that lets you own your time, your choices, your life. She had control over her days, her future, and her happiness. That control, that sense of ownership over her own time, was her real wealth. And no amount of money could ever replace that feeling. It was the reward for the grind, the risk, and the patience. And in that moment, with the quiet breeze on her skin and a warm cup of coffee in her hand, she smiled knowing she had finally won the thing most people chase their whole lives but never catch: true freedom. Most people think real estate is a game only the rich can play. They believe you need a huge pile of cash to get started, or that you have to wait for the perfect market conditions before making a move. Some even say you have to start big, like buying luxury homes or commercial buildings right off the bat. But that's just not true. She started small, really small. With only $10,000 saved up, she bought a rundown duplex that most people would have walked past without a second glance. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't easy. The place needed work, and she had zero experience. She made mistakes, some costly ones. She faced setbacks that made her want to quit. There were moments when fear and doubt crept in, whispering that maybe she wasn't cut out for this. Retiring at 35 wasn't some stroke of luck or a random windfall. It wasn't about hitting the jackpot or stumbling into a perfect opportunity by chance. No, it was about learning a skill that anyone can develop, and applying it with relentless focus and discipline over time. She didn't just dip her toes in the water, she dove deep, soaking up knowledge, running the numbers, and making smart decisions every step of the way. Real estate isn't a magic ticket, and it's definitely not easy. There's no secret formula that guarantees overnight success. But here's the thing, it's simple. It's about understanding the basics, like cash flow, market trends, tenant management, and financing, and then being consistent with those fundamentals. If you take the time to educate yourself, analyze every deal carefully, and stick with it through the ups and downs, real estate has the power to transform your financial future. That's exactly what it did for her. It gave her the freedom to walk away from her job, the peace of mind to live on her terms, and the confidence to know her money was working hard for her every single day. And the best part? It's something you can do too. No matter where you're starting from or what your background is, with the right mindset and strategy, real estate can be the tool that changes everything. It's not about luck, it's about learning, patience, and commitment. And when you put those pieces together, the possibilities are endless. If you want to learn more about building your own real estate empire, don't miss the next video coming up right now.